I want you to picture the greatest, coolest car in cinematic history. It has futuristic gull-wing doors that open to the sky, a shiny, unpainted stainless steel body, and it leaves a massive trail of flaming tire tracks when it hits 88 miles per hour. It is the time machine from Back to the Future, the legendary DMC DeLorean. If you watch the movie, you probably think this car is an absolute performance beast, a futuristic rocket ship built for speed. But the real-life truth? The real-life DeLorean was an absolute, undisputed, total piece of garbage. It was incredibly slow, too heavy, poorly built, and the story behind it involves millions of stolen dollars and a literal briefcase full of cocaine. It is the most ridiculous car story in automotive history, a story of giant egos, government corruption, angry British politicians, and an engine so weak it could barely outrun a minivan. So buckle up, we are hitting 88 miles per hour and diving into the disaster. Chapter 1. To understand the car, you have to understand the man. Meet John DeLorean. In the 1960s, John was an absolute rock star engineer at General Motors. He wasn't your typical boring corporate suit. He was the guy who literally invented the muscle car. John snuck a massive V8 engine into the Pontiac GTO, and it sold like crazy. Then he designed the Pontiac Firebird. He was printing billions of dollars for GM. He dated supermodels, hung out with Hollywood celebrities, and was basically the coolest guy in Detroit. He was the youngest executive in GM history. He was next in line to be the president of the entire company. But John had a massive ego. He hated his boring bosses, he hated board meetings, so in 1973, he did the unthinkable. He just walked into the office and quit. He decided he was going to build his own car company from scratch. It would be called the DeLorean Motor Company. He wanted to build an ethical sports car, a car that was super safe, fuel efficient, and made of materials that would literally never rust. He was going to revolutionize the world. Chapter 2. To build this dream car, John made some absolutely wild design choices. First, the body panels would be made entirely of bare, unpainted stainless steel. It looked like a spaceship. But car guys know, stainless steel is incredibly heavy, and it is an absolute nightmare to clean. If you touch a DeLorean, your oily fingerprints stay there forever. Second choice, the gull-wing doors. They look amazing, but the engineering required to make them open upward was completely insane. They required special aerospace-grade torsion bars just to stop them from crushing your skull. And finally, the engine. John wanted it in the rear like a Porsche, but he didn't have time to design his own engine, so he bought a PRV V6 engine, which was jointly made by Peugeot, Renault, and Volvo. And let me tell you, this engine was an absolute tragedy. This V6 engine only made 130 horsepower. That is pathetic. You put a 130 horsepower engine into a car made of heavy stainless steel, and you get a sports car that takes 10 entire seconds just to hit 60 miles per hour. A modern Honda Civic would absolutely destroy it in a drag race. But John DeLorean didn't care. He was a master salesman. He took his beautiful silver prototype, went on television, and convinced famous celebrities like Johnny Carson and Sammy Davis Jr. to invest millions of dollars into his company. He sold the dream perfectly. Chapter 3. John had the money, but he needed a factory. He pitched his idea to governments all over the world, basically saying, whoever gives me the most free taxpayer money gets the factory. And the winner was the British government. The British government gave John over $100 million in subsidies. In exchange, he had to build the factory in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Now, this was the late 1970s. Belfast was in the middle of a massive, violent political conflict called the Troubles. There were literally riots and bombings happening in the streets. The British thought building a fancy car factory would create jobs and bring peace. But there was one tiny, hilarious problem. None of the workers in Belfast had ever built a car before. They were mostly farmers and construction workers, and now they were supposed to build a highly complex stainless steel spaceship. To fix the engineering, John hired Colin Chapman, the genius founder of Lotus Cars. Colin looked at John's design and said, "This is absolute garbage." He threw away the entire chassis and just secretly put the DeLorean body on top of a Lotus sports car frame. But even with Lotus helping, the factory was a disaster. When the first cars finally rolled off the assembly line in 1981, they were a mess. The stainless steel panels didn't line up, the alternators failed, and those cool gull-wing doors, they would literally get stuck, trapping the drivers inside the car. If you parked a DeLorean too close to another car, you couldn't open the doors to get out. You had to crawl out the tiny toll booth window like a gremlin. They were charging $25,000 for this car, which was more expensive than a Corvette or a Porsche, and it was falling apart in the driveway. Chapter 4. By 1982, the DeLorean Motor Company was completely out of money. The cars weren't selling, the British government refused to give John any more cash, and the factory was literally days away from going bankrupt. John was absolutely desperate. He needed millions of dollars immediately, or his dream was dead. And this is where the story goes from bad business to absolute Hollywood movie. John got a phone call from an investor, but this wasn't a normal investor. It was a massive drug cartel looking to launder money. Or so he thought, because the drug cartel wasn't a drug cartel at all. It was the FBI running a massive undercover sting operation. They told John, hey, if you help us smuggle 220 pounds of cocaine into the United States, we will give you $24 million for your car company. Any normal, sane CEO would have called the police immediately, but John DeLorean was so obsessed with saving his terrible car that he actually said yes. He flew to a hotel in Los Angeles, walked into a room with the undercover agents, and they handed him a literal briefcase full of cocaine. John looked at the cocaine, smiled, and famously said on a hidden camera, "It's as good as gold." And then the FBI agents pulled their guns and arrested him on the spot. The CEO of an international car company was caught on tape in a massive drug bust. It was the biggest scandal of the 1980s. The DeLorean factory went bankrupt 1 week later. The British government completely shut it down. They only ever built about 9,000 cars. The dream was completely, absolutely, embarrassingly dead. The stainless steel cars were left to rot in used car lots. Chapter 5. John DeLorean actually beat the charges in court. He successfully argued that the FBI tricked him into the drug deal, but his reputation was destroyed. The car was considered a massive joke, a punchline for comedians. But then, 3 years later, Hollywood director Robert Zemeckis was making a movie about a kid who travels through time. Originally, the time machine was going to be an old refrigerator strapped to the back of a truck. But Zemeckis thought, hey, what if we use that weird, bankrupt stainless steel car with the bird doors? He thought the DeLorean looked like a spaceship, which meant people in the 1950s would think it was an alien UFO. They added some glowing lights, massive vents on the back, and the flux capacitor. And in 1985, Back to the Future hit theaters. The movie was a massive global blockbuster. Suddenly, the slowest, heaviest, most embarrassing car of the 1980s became the coolest car on the planet. Every kid in the world wanted a DeLorean. Used DeLoreans shot up in value instantly. The car was saved from the garbage dump of history by pure Hollywood magic. Today, surviving DeLoreans are absolute collector's items. Car nerds spend thousands of dollars trying to keep their 130 horsepower engines running. They drive them to conventions, and everyone asks them the exact same question. Where is the flux capacitor? It is the ultimate proof that style beats substance. John DeLorean built a terrible machine, ruined his own life, and got caught with a briefcase full of illegal drugs. But because the car had cool doors, we made it immortal. Next time you see a DeLorean, just remember, that thing isn't traveling through time. It is struggling to merge onto the highway. Anyway, hit that like button, subscribe, and don't do drug deals with the FBI. Catch you guys later.